Welcome back. I'm Levi with MinMax Games, bringing you a deck tech for Inventor Extraordinaire. Alright, so first thing a lot of people will be wondering is, why are we playing Inventor Extraordinaire? This is a hero that has done, no offense to her fans, almost nothing in the last almost year. Basically since Mistveil. And a big part of that was the fact that Enigma matchup was essentially cursed. Like, there was nothing you could do about that. At least from the perspective of a slab dash, which is what I'll be presenting today. Enigma was really bad. Zen was also not great. And so I guess kind of the location that dash fits within a meta is, she is a deck that is targeting slow decks and struggles a bit into aggressive decks. And basically since Mistveil, we've been sort of in this meta where we've got Enigma pushing out the slow decks, and then a bunch of aggressive decks trying to combat Enigma, as well as just aggressive decks being very, very strong for the past year. However, throughout that time, the kind of slow variant of Dash has gotten a lot of upgrades that kind of got overlooked. We saw a little bit of hope for right when Rosetta came out. I know at the Milwaukee Battle Hardened, there's quite a few people piloting a kind of slow fatigue Dash deck with Count Your Blessings. And that deck did reasonably well, aside from the fact that it had no chance into Enigma. And over time, we saw more people become kind of prepared for Count Your Blessings, and that deck, when you were conceding to a pretty large percentage of the field due to Enigma, it just wasn't worth registering. And so throughout that time, between Mistveil, Rosetta, and the Hunted, Dash has gotten a lot of upgrades. Well, this version of Dash. And it's weird when you look at the expansion slots and go, there was no relevant mech cards for her, really. Maybe one or two. But the thing is, this deck is almost entirely a pile of good generics. And we've gotten a lot of very good generics in the last 3 sets. So yeah, I think now that Enigma is gone, Dash's worst matchup goes away, as well as Zen is just left, Viserai left pretty recently, and Aurora is poised to leave very soon as well. So a lot of these top aggro decks are also getting pushed out, and we're going to see a rise of more slow control decks. And that's a meta where Inventor Extraordinaire shines. Based on the first week of results, Dash only won one event. Sorry, the second week. The first week post-Enigma. Dash only won one event, so there's a pretty good chance she'll make it through to national season, but honestly, I think this deck is positioned much better in the meta than people think. So yeah, I'm going to just dive into the list. Obviously, we've got an induction chamber. That's going to be your starting item in every matchup. Nothing special there. And we've got the Tecloplasma pistol. For equipment, I'm playing Crown of Providence. I'm also going to note, this is my current 80. I think another very cool thing about this type of deck is that you have a lot of room in your sideboard to adjust based on your local meta. So a deck that I register to my local ProQuest or a Battle Hardened may look very different than what someone else would register to their local events, their armories, their ProQuests, and all of that. Because you have a lot of space for just different cards for different matchups. So yeah, currently just Crown of Providence as a headpiece. I've got Final Spring Tunic. Nothing too special there. Got Blade back in her gauntlets. Just a rare from the Hunted, but one issue Dash has had is she didn't have very good legs or arm equipment. They've always been kind of her weakest slots. We were really happy with Tunic, and then Crown of Providence, and then past that, there wasn't anything that really was shining for her. But with the Hunted, we got both Blade back in her gauntlets and Quick Dodge Flexors. Quick Dodge Flexors are a massive upgrade for this deck. We basically played Iron Rot before. It was a Tekla-based legs that could turn into an Evo, but oftentimes it was just block 1. So having the option of turning extra resources or blue into a bunch of extra blocks, you can even against aggro decks, block 4 times with this and play a Count Your Blessings, or 5 times in an Oasis Respite. it just translates to a ton of value. So it's a massive upgrade for her. And then for Arcane Barrier, we've got classic Visiatronic, the Arcane Barrier 2, and we also have Adaptive Dissolver now, which it used to be you would just play Achilles Accelerator. However, now we have the option, depending on the matchup, you could choose where you want to put the Dissolver. So you can have your defensive equipment, Arcane Barrier, in whatever slot you want. And if you really want, you've got an extra action point, you can move it between slots. Can't say it's going to be the best option, but you have that option. It's actually a goal of mine. I would like to do that at some point where it isn't actually detrimental. I don't think I've ever seen anyone actually use the Adaptive Dissolver effect for that. What's that? Modular? No, it is just the action. Yeah, so it can move zones. That's irrelevant right now. All right, on to the main deck. We're going to dive right into a bunch of defensive cards and healing. Count your blessings. Just 6 of them. Blue got banned, which is probably a good thing. I think if blue was legal right now, this deck would be very, very good. Much better than it is right now. Granted, that may lead to more Poison the Wells showing up in the meta, so might not actually help her that much, but if they were around, we'd be playing them. I've got 2 Arcane Polarities in the sideboard. This is just for those Arcane matchups, namely like Florian, where it just being able to translate to gaining 4 health off a single card is quite good. This is kind of just still a maybe for me, but right now I think it's worth it for those matchups. Potentially once Aurora leaves, I could see trimming it, but I think I need a little more testing into the Florian matchup to figure out the best way to approach it, because it is a tough matchup, and based on the last weekend of ProQuest results, we've seen that it's a very good deck. Currently on 3 Oasis Respite. This card, I've always been a massive fan of Oasis Respite in this type of slab dash. The issue you ran into was you could only play it off Tunic before. Now with Count Your Blessings, you park either an Oasis or a Count Your Blessings in Arsenal, and you're able to use it more efficiently. Obviously you can still do it off Tunic, but you have a bit more flexibility with it, which makes it much more powerful than it used to be. On to defense reactions. Favorite scene, Sink Below, and the new, very powerful Shelter from the Storm. This is another huge upgrade that Dash IE got. She's always wanted as many 4 blocks as she could get, and getting Shelter from the Storm as another very powerful option, it was huge. I'm also on 3 Firewalls right now. This has always been a love-hate card. It is very good at blocking 4, obviously. Sometimes it helps you filter cards with the block ability, but sometimes it will put a key piece to the bottom that you wanted on top. Sometimes putting an extra Count Your Blessing to the bottom, making it so you can't play your 6th copy until deep in 2nd cycle can be really bad. But it could also dig you one closer to your next one. So it's kind of a weird one, but I do think it's still as good as the 3 of right now, especially with Aurora running around with so many 4-power attacks. Once Aurora leaves, I could see trimming this down, just for a little more consistency, so you have a little more control over kind of how quickly you see everything in your deck. And then that all you got are the last kind of defense reaction type card. So a lot of very defensive cards, as you can tell, and that's because, for those of you who aren't familiar, the kind of game plan in this deck is to block a lot and be very efficient with the Tickle Plasma Pistol, as well as the items. Additionally, I have 1 Remembrance in the sideboard. I couldn't figure out exactly where to put that in here. And now that I've gotten to it, I don't think that was the right place in the deck to explain it, but Remembrance nonetheless. As for items, I mentioned the Induction Chamber that's going to start in play, but in addition to that, we've got 2 more Plasma Purifiers and 2 more Induction Chambers in the sideboard. Now, these are not mainboard cards. In aggressive matchups where you're going to need to be very defensive and kind of trade health, well, I guess not very defensive. You need to kind of mid-range in order to kill them, and you just don't have time to play these out. They can't be played. They're red non-blocks that are taking an action point and 2 resources to put in play, and are not going to pay for themselves before you die a lot of times. So those are only in for slower matchups. So you're going to have games where you board in items and you're planning on setting up, and you've got games where you're going to play mid-range and just none of these items. Additionally, 3 Spark of Genius. This is primarily to get the items out. However, in other matchups, a lot of times it's just going to be a yellow 3 block. Not ideal, but in the matchups where you need to get items in play, it's very crucial. And that's the rest of the item package I'm currently playing. Onto attacks. We've got 3 Command and Conquers, 3 The Weakest Links, 2 Erase Face. That's barely an attack. And these are just types of poppers. So it's basically those 8 plus a Down and Dirty and 2 Battlefront Bastions. And I'll dive into those a little bit more after I've gone over the rest of the cards. Onto the blue package. Currently, I'm on 3 Brothers in Arms, 3 Ripple Away, 3 Warmonger's Diplomacy, a Heart of Findall, 3 Truce, 3 Trot Along, which for now I'm going to separate off to the side slightly, and then I will continue explaining in a bit. 2 Battlefront Bastion, 3 Nasty Surprise, 3 Magnetic Lockwave, and 3 Last Ditch Effort. Now, I separated these because I think this first pile are cards that are going to be in almost every list for the blue slot. These are kind of freebies that I think you should just be playing. Trot Along was a very nice upgrade. It lets you convert 5-card hands a little more effectively, or even just bigger hands when your opponent makes you play a big hand. Being able to give the pistol go again. Obviously, it's not super efficient, but it's more efficient than passing with extra cards in your hand. Truce is a very strong turn 0 play, and can also be similar where you've got extra cards and extra resources. You can set this up. It's also a very strong turn 0 play. Heart of Findall is just a good card in a deck where you always have a use for 3 resources, as well as are typically going to be on the back foot until later in the game. Warmonger's Diplomacy is kind of a shoo-in. It's not super impactful in this meta, but being able to hit Azalea is always nice. Has some applications in Divinset. And there's other random decks where you're like, oh, it's nice to be there, and you need enough blue 3 blocks that aren't good for new to play, so it works. One thing to be careful of with Warmongers is you're not able to load your induction chambers under Warmongers, so you're going to have to ideally make sure that your chambers are loaded before you play this, and you can play it, and then on your next turn you can load your gun and shoot your gun out as many times as you want based on the chambers. Ripple Away, another just very strong blue that fits well with what the deck's trying to do. This, in certain matchups, namely against the Assassins, being able to stop a Frailty token and a Ponder token off of a Codex of Frailty can be a ton of extra value because the Frailty is going to apply to each of your gunshots. I had a game the other day where I was able to ripple away a Codex, and obviously I stopped the Ponder, but the Frailty, I ended up swinging my pistol 4 times because I was fully online. So stopping the Frailty ended up getting me like 4 extra value. So this was essentially 7 value discard from hand, which kind of hard to argue with. And lastly, the 3 Brothers in Arms. This is one that didn't see play for a long time, but now that we've gotten Count Your Blessings, it pairs up, and as well as Quick Dodge Flexors. This lines up much better. I think there's an argument you can maybe play 2, but I've been liking 3 for now. So those are I'll dive into the maybe pile. So I know many of you who have built decks on February know that you've got a maybe pile where you can put cards that are potentially able to make the list. And actually, I'm going to hold off on that slightly. I will talk a little bit about some of the matchups, just so I have a point of reference when I talk about the maybe pile. So into defensive matchups, as rude as it sounds, things like your Guardians, I don't think you really need to dedicate much sideboard space to it. The matchups are quite good. You sit down against something like a Bravo or a Victor and you're very happy. That matchup feels very, very difficult for them, and I don't think it's worth putting extra sideboard space in for them. So the other things you want to be looking at are matchups that are difficult, that can be skewed by just a few sideboard spaces. So Prism is a matchup that has gotten harder because traditionally we ran more poppers and more actual blocking cards. With the addition of Count Your Blessings, we've seen lower number of poppers and lower number of blocking cards, which makes that a little more difficult. So that's where like Remembrances come in and these additional poppers. Remembrance kind of fits two different things where Remembrance can be a yellow declare library. It brings your yellow count up to 10, which is not crazy, but it's better than 9, I guess we'll go with. Additionally, if library isn't an issue that game or you were discarding other yellows to clear it, being able to put back more poppers can potentially let you fatigue them. As long as you can keep their heralds from hitting consistently, your pistol is very effective at clearing board. In that matchup, I like bringing in 1 extra chamber, just so that you can go 3 pistol shots, and it's able to make sure that angels stay under control very well. I think any additional items become a liability because you really don't want to draw them at the wrong time. But only having the 1, I think, isn't quite enough. But I'm still on the fence about that. But yeah, so that the Remembrance is in here because of Prism. So you've got all these poppers. If Prism's a big concern for you, you are able to bring in other poppers. Technically more Remembrances. I don't think that I would play more Remembrance right off, but it's technically a consideration. You've got Amnesia as an option. This is a card that is very good against Vincent, and depending on where Vincent's meta share goes, I think there's an argument to start putting that in the sideboard as well. You can play additional copies of Down and Dirty, more Erase Face, more Fighting, or you can play Fighting Spirits or more Battlefront Bastions. You've got a lot of good popper options in this deck, but yeah, I think I'm continually torn between Fighting Spirit and Battlefront Bastion. I think I might want to switch over to Fighting Spirit because in matchups like Prism, Battlefront Bastion is going to be better, but then you have the aggressive matchups where I think Fighting Spirit comes out a little bit ahead. You are going to be slightly behind a lot of times, and it lets you just throw a 2-card 8 effectively, much more efficiently. But these are all options for poppers, whereas these are primarily, this is just a popper, and then these all kind of have different applications. Down and Dirty is another notable one that we have the one in the list that is primarily for Rangers and Assassins, as well as being a popper. Is it something that you have the flexibility of getting back with Codex to block with? So whether that be Azalea gets back an arrow and you want to get the extra 2 block from Arsenal, or you've got New who gets back a Leave No Witnesses. You now can block with the Down and Dirty and save yourself that 2 life if you didn't feel like blocking out the attack. So that's kind of the discussion on the attacks. The attacks get trimmed down significantly in matchups where you are trying to build up the board state. So these are kind of the first things that get cut when you start putting in items. That's Prism. Right now, I am expecting quite a bit more Prism, which is why I've got so many of these in here. If you're not expecting much, I think you can make some trims in this area and add in other things. Prism's kind of the anomaly where she has a lot of different cards you would sideboard in against her that don't apply as much to other matchups. Technically, if you've got things like Brutes or a lot of decks that may be drawing a good amount, you can play a Balance of Justice in the sideboard as well. I don't think this meta is super common for Balance to get its effect. Same thing with Hold the Line. But these are considerations if you know that you've got some KOs and Levi's in your local area. These are a viable option. If you've got Kano and really, really hate him, you can play Spellfray as well. Currently, I think the Kano matchup is very, very good for Dash. It might have gotten slightly worse now that I've cut Sigil of Solace. But as a whole, I think the matchup is very good between Triple Oasis, like 38 healing between polarities and Count Your Blessings, and AB3, and the ability to, set up a couple items and just start shooting, and hold back like 2 Oasis and 3 resources, and be like, I'm at 60. Can you kill me through 2 Oasis and 3 resources and AB3? But I think tossing in 1 piece of Spellfray kind of takes that matchup from, I don't know, 85 to 90, 95. Some Kano player is going to yell at me in the comments saying that the Kanos I'm playing against just don't know how to stack properly or something. But I really think that the matchup is very cursed for Kano right now. As long as you're careful as Dash and don't overextend too early and give them an opportunity to kill you before you've gained enough health and such. So they aren't in my list right now, but if you really hate Kano, you can put them in. Stonewall Gauntlet's another consideration for the glove slot. I think I like Blade Beckoner slightly more, but if you want to make this already very expensive deck even more expensive, you can play Stonewall Gauntlet. Let's see. I guess I can just discuss. You could technically play a red Pummel if you really want to. It's especially funny with Count Your Blessings because it's pretty common to just go like CNC, floating 1, have Tunic up, and have a card in hand. And it's just a D-React or a Count Your Blessings. Or even, load, CNC, 2 floating, 2 in hand. And most of the time, it's a Count Your Blessings. But the 1 of Pummel, could just catch them off guard. Right now, I don't think you need it, or it's too expensive on your health to play in aggro decks, but I think there's a very reasonable argument for playing 1. I mean, or more if you really want to. But it does risk getting a little bit clunky playing these red 2 blocks. Sigil of Solace is one that's been in the deck for a long time, but as I was mentioning regarding like Prism, having the no blocks can be a bit concerning, and there wasn't a ton of space to side them out. Additionally, against things like Aurora, where they're presenting a lot of on-hits at the 4 breakpoint, having these non-blocks, as effective as they are, just wasn't super good into aggro. And then into defensive decks is where they're best, but that's a matchup where you really don't want to be committing sideboard spaces to. So currently it's cut, but I could see the argument for it coming back. Same thing with the last Arcane Polarity. Let's see. Unmovables are something we used to play. However, Count Your Blessings kind of fills a similar role as something that it's a red that you're paying multiple resources to play, and having unmovables alongside Count Your Blessings, I think, is a bit too much and will be a little too taxing on your blue base, which is why it's out of the list right now. So this is one of the cards in my sideboard, or in my maybe pile, that I'm not actually recommending playing. I'm just explaining why I don't think you should play it. I mentioned the extra remembrances. I think I just had 3 when I was putting this deck together. I don't think you should ever play 3. I think 1 is plenty. And then the next one is blues, or next one. I mentioned these are the kind of maybe blues that I'm playing right now. I think all the blues have like small little pros and cons. Pummel, again, as blue, is an option for the same reason I was explaining, but being a 2 block is a liability. Down but not out, especially with like Trot Along, can be nice. Magnetic Protocol also can be nice. Snags, this round's on me. And then, honestly, I don't think Blue Throttle is worth anymore. We used to play a lot more mech cards, so in matchups where you absolutely had to go for it, you could occasionally hit, but I think this deck is playing like, I don't know, like 9 mech cards. Honestly, it might, all right, I'm counting. 3 Firewalls, there wouldn't be any in here. 3 Spark of Genius. Yeah, in a lot of matchups, you're playing 6, potentially 9. So yeah, Throttle, not viable. previously you used to play, you know, like 20. So you had a reasonable shot if you were in a bind. But these, I think, are all reasonable options. The thing that you're balancing right now is the fact that new exists still. So you have to be a little bit careful on what blues you put in. That's the main reason I'm not playing the one of blue pummel right now, because having a blue in your bandit or blue pummel alongside these random like last ditch efforts or brothers in arms, having new just pummel you with your own pummel feels really bad. So I don't think you can play it right now unless you don't have news in your area. If that's the case, play a blue pummel. A lot of these cards I think just get a lot better if you don't have new. But stuff like down but not out, as good as I think it is as a blue against new, having them be able to trot along down but not out you, that's bad. Trot along down but not out pummel you, that's rough. You don't want that to happen. Magnetic Protocol, obviously the Evo upgrade is textless, but just being a 5 power for new is not ideal. This round's on me. Similar thing, although I could see an argument for bringing this in. It seems pretty good against Syndra. The only concern is now you're bringing a lot of Syndra's attacks down to 2, and you've got a ton of 4 blocks. So I don't know how much it actually saves you, especially since you still have to block for Mask of Momentum a bunch of times. And then Snag, if you're seeing a lot of like Slippy, I think there's an argument for Snag. The issue is Snag is a non-block, which means it can't effectively be part of your blue base in a lot of matchups. Because I think just the one Heart of Find All is about the upper limit for non-blocks. I think there's an argument to play maybe one more, but something like 4 non-blocks is just way too many for your blue base. So as a result, I'm not on Snag right now, but it's something you could sideboard if you really wanted to. There's nothing too special here. These are, I don't know, we're playing bad blues. I think Battlefront Bastion's kind of on the chopping block for me. I'm not super happy with it, again, for the new matchup, but it's been like fine. So it's debatable. Some cards that I don't have here, maybe they should. We saw, I'll be honest, I don't remember the player's name, but it was Battle-Hardened Dublin right before Pro Tour London. While Enigma was still legal, we saw a kind of slapdash make top 8 there. And that list was playing Disillusion Sphere? Is that the name? I think that's the name of the item. The one that prevents 1 from every source of damage, as well as Plasma Mainline. And now my assumption for that matchup is, or actually maybe that would be for like Aurora, but part of the assumption is I think you could play that into like Florian. If Florian is on Scepter and is doing the Rune Chant stack, which, getting slightly sidetracked for Florian, I think you're supposed to play AB3 into him regardless because of Channel Millennium Tree. Florian or Scepter is a bit problematic, but I haven't tested that matchup enough to know for sure. But regardless, in that matchup, if they are able to stack up a bunch of Rune Chants, having the flexibility to, once you have items set up, have a mainline in play, just go Dissolution Sphere. It's going to be 3 turns if you can't attack me, and then 3 more turns, potentially if you set up a second one. That puts you in a spot where, you know, they set up like, all right, we're at 35 Rune Chants, we're almost able to kill you. And you go, okay, wait, you got to wait 6 turns. And by the way, every turn I'm going to go 2 into, or 4 into 4 into 4 into 4. I think that potentially could be a way around that matchup, but again, it's a matchup I haven't tested, so it's a bit tough to tell. And I think there might be a world where that deck is playing Reaping Blade into you already, so maybe that makes things tough. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's something to consider for that matchup. But I don't know what other matchups that was being played into, and it felt like a lot of sideboard space, so it wasn't something that I included here. Another blue you could play, Titanium Bauble, because it doesn't do anything for new. But it's kind of pointless at this point for a lot of the blues. You kind of figure out there are blues that have some marginal value that you can play for other matchups, but you just have to be aware of the liability they can pose for the new matchup. I guess regarding kind of meta deck matchups, I do think the aggro decks are a bit tough. The Aurora matchup's not great. So for this week, this might not be quite as good of a choice, where Aurora is still kind of the most represented and the best performing deck. But I think the matchup might be okay. You've got the weakest links in the Command and Conquers and the Erase Faces. That might potentially slow it down, and you can mid-range a little bit with your 4 blocks. But on beyond that, we saw Florian perform very, very well this week. And that's a matchup that I need to test a little bit more. But I think on paper should be fine. For a standard like defensive Florian, not like the OTK list, in my head at least, the way the matchup should play out is you're setting up items, they're chipping you down, which gives you windows to play out your arcane polarities, count your blessings and stuff. Kind of keep health parity about the same, and then you need to pivot into being aggressive with the weapons. The only concern is when you hit that point where you're super efficient, they also have Florian ability turned on, and they're coming in with, the extra stuff from Grasp, their Plow Unders, their Felling of the Crowns. And I think you can fall into a window where you kind of lose that tempo that you should have from having board set up, and it can occasionally become a little bit difficult to come back from that. But in my head, that's roughly how the matchup should go. I think it should be fine for this deck, but it might be a little bit tough. The fact that there's the Rune Chance and the split damage is very, very nice for things like Oasis Respite and Brothers in Arms and Count Your Blessings, because you're able to use your resources a lot more efficiently for blocking Arcane. As far as kind of other decks, I discussed Prism. I think that's a matchup that has probably gotten a little bit tougher than it used to be. I think it used to be a little bit better, where you were able to block all the heralds much more effectively. I just had a thought. I don't know if there's sideboard space, but there might be a world where you board out Count Your Blessings into Prism and just focus on stopping the attacks, but I don't think that quite works on space. Sorry, slightly off topic. Syndra, and as a result, Phi as well, has always been a difficult, I guess Phi has always been the tough matchup. The Draconic Ninjas have just been difficult. They are very tough to fatigue, especially where Syndra is able to kind of throw that repeated flick damage, almost true damage, that obviously you've got healing, you've got Count Your Blessings and stuff, but it's still a lot of bleed that makes fatiguing that difficult. It might be doable. It's something that I'll need to experiment more with, but for my limited testing of that matchup, I do think fatiguing it is not a great option right now. And you kind of need to mid-range and kind of hope to chip them down. Oh, what else do we have? Obviously Zen is just left, so with Enigma, so nothing to worry about there. Other aggro decks, or kind of aggro decks, Fang is a weird one where I don't think you should be able to fatigue him, but I have been able to in my limited testing. Kind of playing that mid-range plan with the weakest links and Command and Conquers and Erase Faces and stuff. Just trying to slow him down and take enough cards blocking to the point where he'll run out of gas. I'm drawing a blank on what the other... Oh, the Assassins. New and Slippy and Marionette, I believe you should be on the item package for all of those, and you're playing a lot of defensive cards. Having access to Shelter from the Storm and Quick Dodge Flexors and such are going to be very powerful for dealing with some of their kind of combat tricks, whether that be dagger flicks, whether that be reaction buffs going taller. You've got a little more flexibility there. The Slippy matchup I think could get better with Snag, but I know you've heard me say this a lot. I haven't tested it. As mentioned previously, this is a deck that kind of was unplayable up until Enigma just left, so I haven't gotten a ton of time to refine all of the game plans. But I believe that would be the way to go. You set up items, Slippy, I think there might be an argument to mid-range, but new, you are going to need to set up items and try and get to that endgame state where you're able to go wide and punish them. And try not to get fatigued, because Mask of Recurring Nightmares can cause problems there. Rangers, Azalea is always a bit of a tough matchup. Access to Dominate is rough. It's gotten a lot, I think it might have gotten better since the last time this was a meta deck, being Worlds Barcelona, where it made top 8. And at that point, there was much less healing, so the dominated arrows were a lot more detrimental, and you really, really felt them. Whereas here, having access to 30 plus healing can mitigate that a lot more. In addition to the 3 Oasis Respite and stuff like that, and quick dodge flexors and all that. But it's still a scary matchup, because there will be times where Azalea can strand you with a bunch of cards left over. But that is a matchup where I think you need to go purely fatigue. And the main focus is to just make sure that they run out of threats, and then they don't have a weapon. I don't need to talk too much about the Guardians and such, but Guardian matchups are set up items, preserve health total, make sure you're doing kind of on turns and off turns. It's not super relevant to take a turn to shoot twice or something when you could, set up an item or just block out, because decks like Victor, and all of the defensive decks are going to have a bunch of D-reacts or block cards that they want to play out. So by sending just a small turn, you're often giving them windows to filter those cards that you shouldn't be. So yeah, just be patient, set up, and then when you have the opportunity to load up some items, do that, and then try and make sure you're able to fire all of your stuff at once when you do take turns to be proactive. Trying to think. I can't think of more matchups off the top of my head. Oh, Vincent. Vincent's another notable one. That's one where I think in the current iterations, I think the Vincent matchup is very good. We've got all this healing. We've got a lot of tools for fatiguing. We've got a lot of tools for kind of between some disruption and some kind of things you can do, like count your blessings on your turn if they take a setup turn. We've got stuff like Warmongers to slow them down. You've got, Ripple Aways potentially can be very powerful into specific turns of theirs, where, they've got a few incantations up and play a Deathly Wail and you just ripple away and stop 2 or 3 rune chants. However, I think there's a very real chance that Vincent starts putting Reaping Blade in the sideboard for the dash matchup. And I think that matchup gets significantly harder at that point, because they have the opportunity to lower their own health with Blood Debt and Vincent ability. And then she's able to walk her health down and make it so you're kind of, all your healing cards are offline. And then when both players are adequately low, she's got a stockpiled Banished Zone that she's able to play out and kind of close out the game from there. So I think that matchup might be tough if they start playing Reaping Blade. However, sorry if I tap the mic. However, in the current iterations, I think the matchup is quite good. Those are the matchups I'm thinking of right now. I'm sure I missed a meta one. But overall, I think this deck is positioned quite well right now, especially compared to where it used to be. Once Aurora leaves, I think it gets even better. Granted, there's a chance we may see some other aggro decks kind of fill her spot. Syndra might take a step up, but as it stands, I think this deck is, just in a very good spot. And contrary to what people might believe, I think the deck is very fun to play. Having the option of adjusting your game plan and adjusting your sideboard and being able to be very adaptive to how the game is going has always been a fun way of playing the game for me, as opposed to having a set out game plan for every matchup I'm gonna do my thing and ask the questions. I like answering the questions. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this deck tech. Hopefully learned something about the deck, even if you aren't picking it up. We'll be aware that this deck will be showing up at your local pro quests and your battle hardens and stuff, at least leading into high seas. We'll have to see what happens with high seas, but yeah, I think this deck is going to start making some waves in the meta. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.